Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into the history of some of the most powerful institutions on the planet, the ones that guard the very idea of trustworthy money. It's a great question, and the answer goes way deeper than presidents or prime ministers. In fact, some of the biggest decisions that affect your mortgage, your savings, your job, well, they're being made by people you've probably never even heard of. We're talking about the guardians of our whole monetary system, the central banks in each country, and their global counterpart, the International Monetary Fund, or IMF. Okay, so let's get right into it. To understand what these institutions do, we first have to ask, what exactly are they guarding? You know, at its heart, money isn't just paper or data. It's a fragile agreement. It's a shared story we all tell ourselves about what has value. And throughout history, that story has been shattered time and time again by rulers who mess with the currency or financial panics that bring entire nations to their knees. So these first guardians, the central banks, they weren't part of some grand, brilliant design. No, they were born from chaos, crisis, and some pretty spectacular failures. Okay, get this. In 17th century Sweden, the largest coin was a slab of copper that weighed almost 20 kilos. Can you imagine? You'd literally need a wheelbarrow for your weekly shopping. So this logistical nightmare led to Europe's very first banknotes, but the private bank that issued them got greedy, printed way too many, and the whole thing collapsed in a massive scandal. And these two early examples show you the conflict that's baked right into the DNA of central banking. The Swedish Riksbank was created from that failure, and its job was to constrain the king. But then you have the Bank of England, created specifically to fund a war. Its job was to enable the state. This tension, are you a check on the government or a tool for it, has defined their history ever since. All right, let's fast forward to the 20th century. After the absolute chaos of the Great Depression, it was painfully obvious that national guardians just weren't enough. The world needed a global one. I mean, the 1930s were a total failure of cooperation. Instead of working together, countries just turned on each other. They threw up huge tariff walls and deliberately devalued their own currencies to try and steal trade from their neighbors. It was a vicious race to the bottom that just made the global slump so much worse for everyone. So, to stop that from ever happening again, leaders met at Bretton Woods in 1944, and two big visions clashed. The UK's John Maynard Keynes, he wanted a new world currency. But the US, as the world's new superpower, they insisted on a system built around the US dollar. The American vision won, and that's how we got the IMF, with the dollar right at the center of the post-war world. But here's the thing, the system had a fatal flaw, a ticking time bomb built right in. It's called the Triffin dilemma. For global trade to grow, the world needed more and more US dollars, which meant the US had to run deficits. But if those deficits got too big, the world would lose faith in America's promise to back all those dollars with gold. It was a catch-22. The very thing that made the system work was guaranteed to eventually destroy it. And by the late 60s, with huge spending on the Vietnam War, that contradiction became a reality. The world was swimming in dollars. So on August 15, 1971, President Nixon went on TV and, with a single announcement, slammed the gold window shut. And just like that, the entire post-war monetary order was over. This collapse forced a massive reinvention. The IMF was created to be the umpire for a system of fixed exchange rates. But now that system was gone. It had lost its job. So it found a new one, International Crisis Manager.
So the IMF pivoted. It went from being a rule keeper to a global firefighter. But its help came with a serious price, really strict and often controversial conditions. In exchange for a bailout, countries were legally required to restructure their economies, which usually meant painful cuts to public spending.
And what emerged from this was a kind of two-tiered system. In the global south, nations effectively lost a huge chunk of their economic sovereignty to the IMF's conditions. But at the same time, in the wealthy global north, central banks were gaining more independence from politics to fight inflation. So you got this great divergence: policy freedom for the rich and policy instructions for the poor. Which brings us to today. Right now, these institutions are facing a perfect storm of new challenges. The old rulebooks have basically been thrown out, and they're grappling with one crisis after another: financial meltdowns, digital disruption, and climate change, all hitting at once. I mean, just look at the 2008 financial crisis, and then the COVID pandemic. these institutions had to deploy a radical new toolkit. Central banks unleashed trillions of dollars through something called quantitative easing, and the IMF rolled out massive bailouts and even issued hundreds of billions of its own global reserve asset to prevent a total global collapse. On top of that, a technological revolution is here. What's 137? That's the number of countries, representing basically the entire global economy, that are now in a race to create their own digital money. The rise of private cryptocurrencies has forced their hand, sparking this global push for official digital currencies to make sure the state stays in control. And maybe the most contentious debate of all is this one. Should central banks be getting into the business of fighting climate change? Is that their job? The arguments here are fierce. Proponents say climate change is a direct threat to financial stability, which is their core mission, so they have to act. But opponents are warning this is dangerous mission creep. They say it would destroy their political neutrality by forcing them to pick economic winners and losers. So all these pressures are converging at once. You've got high debt, a world that's breaking up into competing geopolitical blocs, and the weaponization of finance itself. All of it is challenging the very model of the independent central bank. And this brings our whole story full circle, right back to that fundamental question. As the world becomes more divided and the challenges get more complex, who can and who should be the guardians of that fragile shared belief we have in the value of money?